If sarcasm was currency, I'd be a billionaire. Too bad it doesn't pay the bills Miranda keeps running up on our joint credit card while pretending she's finding herself after quitting her high-powered corporate law job 6 months ago. My name is Sam Ledbetter, and I'm about to tell you how my perfect marriage became a masterclass in revenge that would make Machiavelli proud. It started on a Tuesday morning in our upscale Boston brownstone. Miranda, who insists everyone call her Mira now because apparently Miranda is too formal for her new bohemian lifestyle, was sprawled across our Italian leather couch in a $500 yoga outfit, scrolling through her phone. Sam, honey, she purred without looking up. I need another 2,000 for my wellness retreat this weekend. I paused, coffee mug halfway to my lips. Another retreat? Didn't you just get back from that spiritual awakening thing in Vermont? That was different. This one is about reconnecting with my authentic self through crystal healing and chakra alignment. She finally looked at me, those green eyes that once made me weak in the knees, now calculating. Besides, you make enough at the engineering firm. What's $2,000? What's $2,000? It's my entire monthly car payment. It's groceries for 3 months. It's the money I've been setting aside to finally fix the leak in our roof that she keeps complaining about. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I nodded like the good husband I thought I was and transferred the money to her account. That afternoon, my best friend Tony called. Tony Kowalski, yes, related to our nosy neighbor Mrs. Kowalski, is an ex-Boston PD detective who now runs a private security company. He's also the only person who tells me the truth, whether I want to hear it or not. Sam, buddy, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to really think about the answer, Tony said over the phone. When's the last time Mira actually contributed anything to your household, besides complaints and credit card bills? I started to defend her automatically, but the words died in my throat. When was the last time? She quit her job claiming she was burned out and needed to explore her passions. Those passions apparently included expensive yoga classes, weekend retreats, daily massages, and a wine habit that would impress a French sommelier. She's going through a transition, I finally said. A transition into what? Professional housewife? Because from where I'm sitting, she's transitioned into a very expensive hobby. That evening, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I looked at our joint bank account statements, really looked at them. What I found made my blood run cold. In the past 6 months, Mir had spent over $37,000. $37,000. On what? Spa treatments, designer clothes, mysterious charges to places I'd never heard of, and cash withdrawals that totaled nearly $8,000. But the real kicker was the Uber charges. Hundreds of them. All going to the same address on Beacon Hill, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Boston. I confronted her that night. She was in our bedroom, trying on a dress I'd never seen before, a stunning red number that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Mira, we need to talk about money. She spun around, the dress flowing dramatically. Do you like it? I got it for dinner tomorrow night. Dinner with who? My cousin Bradley. I told you about him. He's in town from New York, works in finance, very successful. She smoothed the dress over her hips. He's taking me to that new place on Newbury Street. Bradley. Her cousin Bradley, who I'd somehow never met in our 5 years of marriage. Bradley, who lived at that Beacon Hill address, according to my quick Google search. How much did the dress cost? Her face hardened. Does it matter? You make good money, Sam. We can afford it. We can afford it? Mira, you spent $37,000 in 6 months. You don't have a job. There is no we in this equation. There's just me working 60-hour weeks while you play dress-up. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. Then she laughed, that tinkling sound that used to charm me and now set my teeth on edge. Oh, Sam, you're being dramatic. It's not like I'm having an affair or anything. I'm just enjoying life for the first time in years. Don't you want me to be happy? The way she said, it's not like I'm having an affair, sent ice through my veins. It was too specific, too defensive. People don't usually bring up affairs unless they're on their mind. That night, after she left for her dinner with Bradley, I did something that would have horrified the old Sam. I logged into our home security system and pulled up the footage from the past month. What I saw changed everything. The security footage revealed a pattern that made me sick to my stomach. 3 times a week, sometimes 4, Mira would leave the house around 8 p.m. and return between 2 and 4 a.m., always dressed to kill, always taking an Uber to that same Beacon Hill address. But the real smoking gun came 2 days later. I was picking up my dry cleaning when the elderly Korean woman behind the counter handed me an extra bag. "For your wife," she said with a smile. "Very beautiful dress. Very expensive." Inside was a designer gown I'd never seen before, easily worth $5,000. The receipt was still attached, and it was addressed to Mira plus B, with a note, "For our special evening, love always, Bradley." My hands shook as I read it. Bradley, her cousin Bradley, who signed love notes and bought her $5,000 dresses. I called Tony immediately. "I need your help," I said without preamble. "I think Mira is having an affair." 20 minutes later, Tony was at my house, looking at the evidence I'd compiled. The security footage, the bank statements, the dress, the Uber records I'd printed out. "Sam," he said quietly, "this isn't, I think. This is, I know. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" What did I want to do? The old Sam would have confronted her directly, probably begged her to go to counseling, maybe even blamed himself for not being attentive enough. But looking at that evidence, seeing how calculated and deliberate her deception had been, something hardened inside me. I want to know everything. Who he is, how long it's been going on, what they're planning. Everything. Tony grinned. The same grin he used to get when he was about to bust a particularly satisfying case. "Now you're talking. But we're going to do this right. Legal, smart, and thorough. By the time we're done, you'll have enough evidence to bury her in divorce court." Over the next week, Tony taught me the basics of surveillance, how to follow someone without being noticed, how to use recording apps on my phone, how to gather evidence that would hold up in court. We started with Bradley. A few hours of research revealed that Bradley Morrison was indeed from New York. But he wasn't Mira's cousin. He was a hedge fund manager who'd been divorced twice and had a reputation for dating married women. He owned the Beacon Hill condo and had been in Boston for 3 months, supposedly setting up a new branch office. But the real breakthrough came when Tony used his contacts to run a deeper background check. "Sam, you need to sit down for this," Tony said, spreading photos across my kitchen table. "Bradley Morrison isn't just some rich guy your wife is screwing. He's got connections to some very questionable people. Money laundering, offshore accounts, the works. He's never been charged, but he's been investigated by the FBI twice." I stared at the photos. Bradley leaving expensive restaurants, Bradley at charity galas, Bradley with a string of beautiful women who all looked remarkably similar to Mira. "There's more," Tony continued. "I talked to a friend who works divorce cases. Morrison has a pattern. He targets married women, usually wealthy ones or ones married to wealthy men. He wines and dines them, makes them feel special. Then slowly starts asking about their husband's finances, their assets, their business connections." The room spun around me. "You think he's using her to get information about me? About my company?" "I think he's using her. Period. The question is whether she knows it or if she's just a useful idiot who thinks she's found her Prince Charming." That night, I decided to find out. I followed Mira to Bradley's condo, parking across the street with a clear view of his building. At 11 p.m., they emerged together, clearly having had quite a bit to drink. They were laughing, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. They looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy, in a way that Mira and I hadn't looked in years. That should have broken my heart. Instead, it made me angry, furious. She was spending my money to look beautiful for another man, living in my house while planning God knows what with a potential criminal, and having the time of her life while I worked myself to death to support her journey of self-discovery. I followed them to an upscale bar in the Back Bay. Using techniques Tony had taught me, I managed to get a table close enough to overhear their conversation. What I heard made my blood boil. "He's so naive," Mira was saying, twirling her martini olive. "He actually thinks I'm at a yoga retreat this weekend." I could tell him I was joining the circus and he'd probably offer to buy me a trapeze. Bradley laughed, a cold sound. "That's what makes this so easy. Trusting husbands are the best kind. They never see it coming until it's too late." "Speaking of which," Mira leaned closer, "I got those documents you wanted. His company's financial records, the client list, everything. It's all in my purse." My heart stopped. She was stealing confidential information from my engineering firm. Information that could destroy my career, ruin my reputation, and potentially land me in legal trouble if it fell into the wrong hands. "Perfect," Bradley said, taking the envelope she slid across the table. "My associates will be very pleased. This should be enough to move forward with the acquisition." "Acquisition? What acquisition?" "And after?" Mir asked. "After your people buy out his company?" "After, my dear, you'll be a very wealthy divorced woman, and Sam Ledbetter will be a very poor, unemployed engineer who never saw it coming." They were planning to destroy my life. Not just end our marriage. Destroy everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built. And they were doing it with my own money in my own house, using my own trust against me. I sat in that bar, listening to my wife and her lover plot my complete destruction, and felt something I'd never felt before. Pure, crystalline rage. Not the hot anger of a moment, but the cold, calculating fury of a man who'd been pushed too far. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they'd picked the wrong engineer to mess with. Game on. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day planning. If Mira and Bradley thought they were dealing with a naive, trusting husband, they were about to learn otherwise. My first stop was to see a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Margaret Chen, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Boston. Tony had recommended her with the words, "She's expensive, but she eats cheating spouses for breakfast." Margaret's office was all sharp angles and steel, much like Margaret herself. She was probably 60, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Ledbetter," she said after I'd laid out my evidence, "you have an excellent case for divorce. But more importantly, you have evidence of corporate espionage and potentially criminal conspiracy. Have you considered going to the FBI?" "I want to handle this myself first," I said. "I want her to know that she underestimated me before I destroy her legally." Margaret smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. "I like you already. What did you have in mind?" Over the next 2 hours, we planned a strategy that would protect my assets, expose Mira's affair, and ensure that she got nothing in the divorce. Margaret also connected me with a cybersecurity expert who could help me secure my company's data and potentially trace what information had already been stolen. But the personal revenge? That was all mine. I started small. Mira had a standing appointment at an exclusive spa every Thursday, $150 for a rejuvenating facial. I called the spa, pretending to be her assistant, and canceled all her future appointments, claiming she was moving to California. Then I canceled her yoga classes, her Pilates sessions, her weekly massage appointments. All of them. Next, I visited our joint credit card companies and reported suspicious activity. Not fraud, I was careful about that. But I expressed concern about unusual spending patterns and requested that all future purchases over $500 require verbal confirmation from both cardholders. The beauty of this approach was that it wasn't illegal or even particularly mean. I was just being a concerned husband looking out for our financial security. But the real masterstroke came when I remembered something from my engineering background: GPS tracking. Mira's car was still under warranty, which meant it had a built-in GPS system for roadside assistance. With a few phone calls and some creative storytelling about being worried about car theft in our neighborhood, I managed to get access to the tracking data. What I found was a gold mine. Not only could I see everywhere she'd been for the past 3 months, but I could also set up alerts for when she went to specific locations. I now had real-time updates on her affair, complete with timestamps and locations. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to let Mira know that her husband wasn't quite as naive as she thought. On Friday night, she announced she was going to another wellness retreat for the weekend. This one was supposedly in the Berkshires and cost $3,000. That sounds wonderful, honey, I said, kissing her cheek. I hope you find what you're looking for. She looked at me strangely, probably wondering why I wasn't complaining about the cost, but just smiled and packed her bag. 20 minutes after she left, my phone buzzed with a GPS alert. She was at Bradley's condo. Perfect. I waited until 10 p.m., then drove to Beacon Hill. Sure enough, her car was parked outside Bradley's building. I took photos, noting the time and date, then went home and waited. At 2 a.m., I sent her a text. Hope you're enjoying the Berkshires. The weather looks beautiful there, much better than here in Boston. My phone rang within minutes. Sam? Her voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. Why are you texting so late? I couldn't sleep, so I was looking at weather apps, thinking about you. It's supposed to be gorgeous in the Berkshires tomorrow. Perfect for all that outdoor meditation you love. Silence, then. Yes, it's very peaceful here. I'm sure it is. Hey, I was thinking of driving up tomorrow to surprise you with lunch. What's the name of that retreat center again? More silence, longer this time. Actually, Sam, they have a very strict no visitors policy. It's all about maintaining the spiritual energy of the space. But I'll be home Sunday night and we can have dinner then. Of course. Well, enjoy your spiritual energy. I love you. I love you too. She hung up and I smiled in the darkness. Let her spend the weekend wondering how much I knew. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Sunday morning, I put the next phase of my plan into action. I called Mira's best friend Jessica, who had been covering for her affair from the beginning. Hey Jess, it's Sam. I'm planning a surprise party for Mira's birthday next month, and I wanted to make sure I invite all her new friends from yoga and those retreats she's been going to. There was a pause. Oh, that's so sweet of you, Sam. I know she's made some really close friends through all these wellness activities. I'd love to meet them. Maybe you could give me some names? Another pause, longer this time. You know, Sam, maybe you should talk to Mira about that. I wouldn't want to spoil any surprises. Of course, but hey, since you two are so close, I'm sure she's told you all about this Bradley guy she's been spending time with. Her cousin from New York? I'd love to include him in the party. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Jessica? You there? Sam, she said finally, her voice small. I think maybe you and Mira need to talk. About what? Just talk to your wife, Sam. She hung up. Perfect. Now Jessica was panicking, which meant she'd call Mira immediately, which meant Mira would come home in full damage control mode. I didn't have to wait long. Mira burst through the door at 3 p.m., 2 hours earlier than planned, looking frazzled and guilty. Sam, you're home. I thought you were playing golf with Tony today. Rain got canceled, I said, not looking up from my laptop. How was the retreat? It was enlightening. Very enlightening. She was fidgeting with her purse strap, a tell I'd learned to recognize over 5 years of marriage. Listen, Jessica called me. She said you were asking about my friends. I wanted to plan a surprise party for your birthday. Is that a problem? No, of course not. It's just some of my new friends are very private people. They might not be comfortable with parties. Like Bradley? She went very still. What about Bradley? Your cousin, Bradley. From New York? Jessica seemed to think I should talk to you about him. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much Jessica had told me, whether she could still salvage her story. Bradley is complicated, she said finally. Complicated how? He's going through a difficult divorce, very messy. He's been leaning on me for emotional support, and I think Jessica misunderstood the nature of our relationship. Interesting. She was going with the emotional support angle. Not a complete admission, but not a complete denial either. She was testing the waters, trying to see how much trouble she was in. That's very generous of you, I said. Helping family through tough times? Maybe I should reach out to him, offer some man-to-man support. I went through a rough patch when my brother got divorced. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. I mean, he's very private about his situation. He wouldn't be comfortable talking to someone he doesn't know. But we're family, sort of. Cousin-in-law? She stared at me, and I could see her trying to read my expression, trying to figure out if I was genuinely clueless or if I was playing with her. Sam, she said slowly, is there something you want to ask me? This was it, the moment of truth. I could confront her directly, lay out all my evidence, demand an explanation, or I could keep playing the game, keep letting her think she might still be in control while I finished setting my trap. I chose option 2. Just one thing, I said, closing my laptop and looking her directly in the eyes. Are you happy? In our marriage, I mean. Because if you're not, if there's something missing, I'd rather know now than find out later when it's too late to fix things. The guilt that flashed across her face was so obvious it was almost comical. For a moment, I thought she might actually confess everything. Instead, she came over and sat next to me on the couch, taking my hands in hers. Sam, I love you. I know I've been distant lately, and I know this whole finding myself thing has been hard on you. But yes, I'm happy. We're happy, aren't we? She was good. I had to give her that. The right amount of vulnerability, the perfect balance of reassurance and uncertainty. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, heard her plotting my destruction with my own ears, I might have believed her. We are, I said, squeezing her hands. I just want to make sure we stay that way. She smiled, leaning in to kiss me. We will, I promise. As her lips touched mine, all I could think about was how those same lips had been kissing Bradley Morrison 2 hours ago. How this same mouth had been planning my financial ruin over martinis. But I kissed her back and smiled, because I needed her to believe she was still winning. Because in exactly 1 week, I was going to destroy her world so completely that she'd wish she'd never heard the name Sam Ledbetter. The next Friday, Mira announced another weekend retreat. This time it was a digital detox in New Hampshire, which conveniently explained why she wouldn't be answering her phone. That sounds perfect, I said. I'll probably spend the weekend working on that project proposal anyway. She kissed me goodbye, told me she loved me, and walked out the door with her weekend bag, heading straight to Bradley Morrison's condo for what would be the last weekend of her double life. Because while she was gone, I was going to end this charade once and for all. My first stop was Bradley's office building. Tony had discovered that Morrison worked late most Friday nights, preparing for Monday meetings with his mysterious associates. This gave me the perfect opportunity to have a private conversation with my wife's lover. I waited in the parking garage until I saw his silver BMW pull in around 8 p.m. Then, I followed him to the elevator. Bradley Morrison, I said as the doors closed. He turned, looking annoyed at being interrupted. Yes. Do I know you? Sam Ledbetter, Mira's husband. The color drained from his face, but to his credit, he recovered quickly. I'm sorry, I don't know any Mira. I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing him one of the photos I'd taken of them together. Really? Because this woman who looks exactly like my wife seems to know you pretty well. The elevator reached his floor, and the doors opened. He stepped out, and I followed. Look, Mr. Ledbetter, Sam is fine. After all, we're practically family, aren't we? I mean, you've been sleeping with my wife for 3 months, stealing confidential information from my company, and planning to destroy my career. That makes us practically brothers. He stopped walking and turned to face me. Up close, I could see why Mira was attracted to him. He was handsome in that polished, expensive way that screamed money and success. But his eyes were cold, calculating. What do you want? He asked. I want you to know that you picked the wrong mark, I said calmly. See, you and Mira made one crucial mistake. You assumed I was stupid, naive, easy to manipulate. Aren't you? The mask slipped and I saw the contempt underneath. Not even close. I'm an engineer, Bradley. I solve problems for a living. And you're just another problem that needs solving. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. And what exactly do you think you can do to me? I have more money, better lawyers, and more connections than you could dream of. Your wife came to me willingly, and she's been very helpful in gathering information about your little company. By Monday, my associates will own controlling interest in your firm, and you'll be out on the street. About that, I said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. You might want to look at this before you make any more threats. He opened the envelope, and I watched his face change as he read through the documents inside. Bank records showing every payment Mir had received from his accounts. Photos of them together with dates and timestamps. Recordings of their conversations, including the one where they planned my destruction. And most importantly, copies of the fake financial documents I'd had my cybersecurity expert create. Documents that showed my company was worthless, buried in debt, and under investigation by the SEC. You see, Bradley, I've been playing this game a lot longer than you think. Every document Mira stole for you, fake. Every financial record, fabricated. Every piece of information about my company that you've been feeding to your associates, completely worthless. His hands were shaking now. This is impossible. I had the documents verified by who? The same experts who told you that a small engineering firm in Boston was worth a hostile takeover? The same people who didn't bother to check public records that would have shown you that my company was sold to a major defense contractor 6 months ago, and I'm now a very wealthy man with very powerful friends? That last part was a lie, but he didn't need to know that. But here's the best part, I continued. While you've been wasting your time and your associates' money chasing a company that doesn't exist anymore, I've been documenting every aspect of your relationship with my wife. Corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud, theft of confidential information. I have enough evidence to put you away for 10 years. You can't prove any of this in court, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Can't I? I have recordings, Bradley. Hours of them. Including the one where you and Mira discuss bribing a federal contractor to get inside information about defense projects. That's not just corporate espionage. That's treason. Another lie, but a convincing one. What do you want? He asked again, but this time his voice was small, defeated. I want you gone. Out of Boston, out of Mira's life, out of my life. Tonight. And I want you to make sure your associates know that Sam Ledbetter is not someone they want to mess with. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. And Bradley? When Mira calls you tomorrow wondering why you're not answering your phone, I want you to tell her exactly what happened here tonight. I want her to know that her husband isn't the naive fool she thought he was. I left him standing in that hallway, clutching the evidence of his own stupidity, and went home to wait for the final act. Mira called me Saturday afternoon, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Sam, I tried calling you this morning, but you didn't answer. Sorry, honey. I was in meetings all morning. How's the digital detox going? It's fine. Listen, I might come home early. I'm not feeling well. Oh, no. Do you need me to pick you up? No, I'll drive myself. I should be home by tonight. She hung up before I could respond. She walked through our front door at 7 p.m., looking like she'd aged 5 years in 2 days. Her hands were shaking, her makeup was smudged, and she kept glancing around our house like she was seeing it for the first time. How was your retreat? I asked innocently. Sam, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, we need to talk. Of course. What about? She sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap like a child about to confess to breaking something valuable. I haven't been entirely honest with you about where I've been going these past few months. Oh? I've been having an affair. The words hung in the air between us. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm, before finally responding. I know. Her head snapped up. You know? I've known for weeks, Mira. The question is, what are we going to do about it? She started crying then. Big, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I'm so sorry, Sam. I never meant for it to happen. It just did. Did it? Or did you plan it? Did you plan to steal confidential information from my company? Did you plan to help Bradley Morrison destroy my career? She went very still. How do I know? Because I'm not the stupid, trusting husband you thought I married. I'm the man who's been documenting every lie you've told, every dollar you've stolen, every law you've broken for the past month. I stood up and walked to my desk, pulling out a file folder that contained copies of everything I'd gathered. Corporate espionage, Mira. Theft of confidential information. conspiracy to commit fraud. Do you have any idea what the penalties are for those crimes? She was staring at the folder like it was a snake about to strike. But here's what's really going to happen, I continued. You're going to pack your things and move out tonight. You're going to sign divorce papers that give you nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, nothing. And you're going to disappear from my life forever. Sam, please. Or, I said, cutting her off, I turn this evidence over to the FBI, and you spend the next decade in federal prison. She looked up at me with those green eyes that had once made me fall in love, and I saw that she finally understood. The game was over, and she had lost completely. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. Yes, you did. You meant to destroy me. The only difference is, I'm better at this game than you are. She packed her bags that night and left without another word. The divorce papers were signed within a week, and Bradley Morrison? He transferred to his company's London office the next month and never contacted either of us again. 6 months later, I was sitting in my favorite bar, having a drink with Tony, when she walked in with a man I didn't recognize. She looked older, tired, and when our eyes met across the room, she quickly looked away. You know, Tony said, following my gaze, I heard she's working as a paralegal now, making about $30,000 a year. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the woman who had tried to destroy my life and ended up destroying her own instead. Here's to underestimating people, I said. Tony clinked his glass against mine. Here's to never making that mistake. As we drank, I thought about the lesson I'd learned from the whole experience. Trust is a precious thing, and when someone betrays it, they deserve whatever consequences follow. Mira had gambled everything on the belief that I was too naive, too trusting, too weak to fight back. She had been catastrophically wrong.